Greeting, YouTube. I've discussed the lost knowledge trope before. Oh, I forgot my cute little light in the background. I was just doing some far more serious videos that don't warrant a cute little light in the background. Um, and I've encountered it again. I recently was reading the game Polaris. It is a setting, a system that's, in my book, far too complex than it needs to be. Um, a setting of underwater colonies. So the surface world is no longer habitable on Earth, and everyone lives underwater, and the dynamics of this and such. And it takes place in the far future. I think it's like 600 years from whenever the Earth becomes uninhabitable. So could be 700 or 800 years in the future. Who knows? And they passed through a high level of technology at one point. The geneticians, I think they call them, essentially genetic master scientists or something. And then there's, of course, the inevitable fall, and now people are trying to recover, yada, yada, yada. And I'm bothered by that. Because one of the things that people brought up, I think the last time I discussed this, was the cloud. Now, lots of folks have info on the cloud. Now, I have the connection here, which lets me go into my Google Drive. I don't have a lot in my Google Drive. I really don't keep much there. I have a few things on there. But I have an SD card on my phone. So on my SD card, I've got 48 gigs of gaming books to look at. 48 gigs of them. Just purchased a whole lot of them in September for my latest Google payment. I think I picked up 5 or 6 different PDFs off of Drive-Thru RPG. And some folks like me will carry hard copies around. Not hard copies, but our own data. It's right here. I can access it. But you'll notice behind me, those are hard copies. I don't need electricity to access those, just sunlight. And there are going to be people like that who will always have this kind of knowledge. Because while all of this stuff behind me is RPG related, I got shelves and shelves of reference books of all kinds, covering everything you can imagine. My tastes are broad. And there will be folks like that always. But as far as the cloud is concerned, now, the cloud means that you have data which is accessible from any place that you can have a digital connection. You have an electronic connection that lets you hook into the internet. You can access your data from everywhere. That's the beauty of the cloud. Your info is here, and as long as you have connections to it, you can access that data. And people seem to have this mental image that your data on a cloud is literally like in flux. It's just out there. But it isn't. Saying that you have data on the cloud just means that you have your data on someone else's server. Instead of being on your hard drive here, I have an external hard drive which has all my data. I keep my data away from the operating system, so when the computer crashes, which it has, my data is safe. Instead of having your data on your hard drive, whether it's internal or external, it just means that the cloud has got your data on somebody else's server, which means if the entire network collapses in a post-apocalyptic setting, all of your data is on that computer. Now, I realize you probably protected it with a password if you're smart, probably a good one. At least make it at least 12 characters long. More is better. And make sure you have capital letters and numbers and symbols. Because if you do it right, that could take a long time to break. But in a post-apocalyptic situation, it will be a big benefit to whoever has that server physically to break those passwords and access the data that's on there. Because that data could be the difference between life and death. It could be the difference between boredom and entertainment. And don't discount boredom as a danger in a survival situation. In a post-apocalyptic setting, boredom can be dangerous just like anything else can. So your data could still survive, whatever that data is. And we've got so much digital material out there. People have been intentionally digitalizing things like Library of Congress and stuff, but less be honest. There's a lot of bootlegs out there. Bootlegs of books and comics and TV and music and movies and software. And all of that bootleg stuff is still going to be available, as well as the official stuff, on those servers, on your devices. And it's not hard to power one of these things. It's not hard to transfer the data. I've got a nice little cable right here, that I use for moving data from my hard drive to my phone, because it makes it much easier. My phone, just because another external hard drive. That's it. Boop, boop, done. Okay? Very rarely do I go from my phone to my hard drive, but it has happened. So I don't think we're going to lose as much data as people think you're going to. I really don't. It's going to get saved, not necessarily by the people who created the data, maybe not by the people who really want the data, but the data's out there, and people will access it. In fact, Polaris goes to the extent that there are hybrids, people who have been modified, often genetically, to be able to survive in an underwater environment, which makes perfect sense. And yet, because of the fall, their very existence is a valuable commodity. They are valuable for their genes. And so they are the targets of being hunted. So people can reverse engineer them or learn from them. But if you genetically engineered a bunch of people at some point, then that means they have descendants. And what you've just done is create a new species. And if you have a species, or even an individual, and you've placed them into the position of being nothing more than valuable data, that's dehumanizing. That's horrible. I don't like that. I don't want it in a game. I don't want people having to spend their entire lives being targeted everywhere they go, being in danger from every corner. Does that sound familiar? That a game system says that this group of people, right here, for their genes, can be targeted, can be killed, can be processed, as though they are a commodity, as a thing. Does that sound kind of ugly to anybody else? Does that, maybe you don't want that in your game for PCs? Now, I could fully see that trope for a particular individual that wants to play that. They want to be I was, horribly, mutilated by the government or a corporation. I did not volunteer for this. I am now a combat monster, or whatever they are. They even give a nice example in Polaris of someone that had that happen to them, who cannot really remember their past life, and who is now a monstrous-looking thing. But their shred of humanity is still there. Now, if a person wants to play that, cool, go for it. You'll see that trope in all kinds of fiction. It's common all over the place. It isn't a bad trope. But when the system sets up a group of people to be targeted because their bodies are valuable to people, that's ugly. And that is a part of the lost knowledge trope that I also don't like. This is all connected, and I don't like any of it. So I can see in like a fantasy setting, full-blown, elves, dragons and stuff, lost knowledge could probably happen because it's magic. There's magic. They could literally erase it from the world if they wanted to. But in our world, where there are surfers and phones and books, no. All that data can't be lost. Some people may be hoarding that data. They may be using it as a bargaining chip. That's different. The data exists somewhere. And once you find it, disseminating it isn't that hard. Copying it is not difficult if you have access to computer technology, and the people in the Polaris setting do. They have to. They're living in underwater colonies. If you don't have access to a computer to help you run those things, you're not going to live long. It's going to be very hard to run one of those properly without some computer backup. systems to help you run the whole mess that you're in. Not a lot of purely analog submarines in the world right today, if you know what I mean. So yeah, not a big fan of the lost data trope. If other people have used it correctly, in their opinion, tell me. And do you agree that treating a person, whether it's an NPC or a player character, as nothing more than a walking piece of data to be consumed by someone is as ugly as I think it is? Chime in.